back with Dr. Ben, RPP FM Health Matters. Our next guest, Kush. Now, Kush, I'm going to get you to, when you come on in a second, to do your last name, because it's a bit of a tricky one for me. But Kush, best-selling author of a new book, Play at Your Peak, is coming to talk to us about why peak performance is important. As we know, this show is all about health matters. It's about moving towards health, wellness, performance, being our best, not just about how not to be sick. So I asked Kush to come on because he is probably one of Australia's leading guys talking about the area of peak performance in our life. Kush, welcome to the show.
Glad to be on the show. Thank you very much, Dr. Ben, for inviting me.
Now, Kush, tell me your last name. Give it to us.
It's Kahadugoda.
Kahadugoda.
It's close enough.
Yeah, thank you, mate. That's super good. So, Kush, peak performance. Why should our listeners be interested in peak performance? Isn't it okay just to kind of get along, get by, do okay? Why should we be seeking out peak performance in our life?
Yeah, so I think for me, when it comes to us human beings, there's a lot of potential all of us actually have, but there's a big difference between having potential and actually realizing that potential. So, and just imagine if all of us can at least realize half of our potential, the world would be a really, really better and different place. So that's where I believe peak performance actually plays in. So for me, peak performance, peak is pretty much at the heightened level of something, right? And peak performance is pretty much playing your best ability to your highest potential, and the key underlying factor here is to your ability and your potential, not Dr. Ben's potential, not Kush Kahadugoda's potential or anyone else's. It's the person who's applying it. So I believe to get the maximum out of one's life, it's always worth looking at how can we maximize that potential through different techniques, concepts, and hence peak performance.
What I loved in what you said there is it's not just about us. It's about how can we tap our potential? How can we strive to perform at our best, not just for us, but for our team? How can we do that for our loved ones? How can we do it for our family? How do we tap that for our community, not just for us? Don't seek peak performance just for us, but seek peak performance for the impact it's going to make on the people around you. And I love your definition of peak performance as well. So if we were wanting to take a measure of our life right now, and we would ask the question, am I performing at my peak? Am I performing at my best? Am I striving towards peak performance? Because I think that's probably a moving target. If I was doing bicep curls, my peak performance at bicep curls might be 15 kilos right now. But if I keep doing it, my next peak performance would be 20 kilos. So I think it's a moving scale. And as you said, we need to be careful not to compare ourselves to others or compare ourselves with where we're at right now, knowing that our performance can increase over time. But how would someone measure themselves? How would I know if I'm doing my best right now, if I'm performing at my best?
That's an interesting one. I think that'll depend on the endeavor you're trying to pursue as well as your own individuality as well. And this is where I think the concept of lead and lag measures actually come in. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we are all fixated on the lag measure, which is, say, for example, you're trying to lose weight, and the focus is, losing 10 kilos or hitting an optimal weight target, but that's the lag measure. But what often gets, overlooked is what are the lead indicators that would ensure us hitting that lag indicator of losing that weight. It could be, doing your push-up, right? Say 20 push-ups a day, or going for a 5-kilometer walk every day. Whatever those activities you set out to do in order to achieve that final goal is the lead. So what we can actually directly control is that lead measure. And so that's the way I tend to look at it, and it has worked quite well in most of the endeavors I have successfully pursued. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, if we just work on the lag measure of peak performance or any goal to that matter, it's a hit and a miss, because by the time you realize it, it's too late.
I know your book talks quite a bit about this and goes into this in some depth, but if we're wanting to achieve something, often it's not so much a skill or a technique that is the key, but it's how we turn up. It's the kind of character we bring. And one of the things I think, and your book talks about it beautifully, is about how do we have more energy and focus? How do we have the energy to do the thing and the focus, the clarity to pursue it? How do we do that? How do we keep energy and focus in our life?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome thing to talk about, especially so the way I kind of look at performing at one's peak is there are these three things that should come into play. One is the performance aspect itself, and the second one is energy and enthusiasm, and the third one is positive mental attitude. Mm-hmm. I believe when all these three things intersect, the intersection is the playing at your peak. Otherwise, you can just have the performance aspect and not have the other two, and it's not going to be a sustainable, enduring, and a long-lasting, impactful performance. Mm. So I think that in terms of the how-to part, I always believe. So the way I started the journey was pretty much looking at the physical aspects of it. So peak performance has two aspects, so to speak, and if you want to take it to another dimension, you can say three aspects, including spirituality. But if we just leave the spirituality part out, it's the physical game and the mental game. And often what I find is it's easier or simpler to start with the physical aspect of the game, because that's something most of us can readily understand. So Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about this really, really well in his podcasts, as well as his various articles and books. So he says trying to affect your mental game with pure mental pursuits is like trying to catch mist. The more you try to catch it, the more it moves away. For most people, and there might be that exceptional person who might be able to, master the mental game with mental aspects. But often what I find is if you look at physical endeavors, there's a strong link between your physical game and the mental game, and the physical game can really affect the mental game, and then vice versa. So just simple things like breathing, exercise, those things immediately and very impactfully changes your mental game. So I sort of see that as that bridge. And when I started my journey, I always started with the physical game, mastering it as much as possible. And it is an ever-evolving game as well, to really look at the mental aspect, if that makes sense.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense, Kush. That is really, really good. Again, it's not necessarily the strategy, the tool, but it's how we turn up. And to practice how you turn up on a physical game is training the same muscle on how we need to turn up if we were to play a mental game. So, what's it going to take if you commit to running 5Ks 3 times a week? It's going to involve the discipline of maybe getting up early. It's going to involve the discipline of having a ritual. It's going to involve the discipline of accountability. It's going to involve the discipline of organisation. These different character traits that you get to practice in the pursuit of a physical game, which you could then apply to a mental game.
Yep.
I love that. That podcast, by the way, is the Huberman Lab. It's a really, really interesting podcast where he brings the science of performance to a whole range of different aspects of our life. Really, really interesting podcast. Mate, What happens though when we, achieve? I guess this is a challenge often for people that are high achievers, is they do pursue some kind of goal. They get to the goal, and then sometimes there's a void after that. I'm just trying to think of the gentleman who was one of the two astronauts to land on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Yes, Buzz Aldrin. When Buzz Aldrin returned from landing on the moon, I mean, what an amazing, crazy, ridiculous, epic adventure. When he returned quite lost, and in fact became quite disconnected with so much of his life, and pursued alcoholism and a whole range of other things. For someone who's done something incredible, and it was he talks about when you do something like land on the moon, what's after that? And he felt a void. He felt an emptiness after that. So what do we do after we achieve the thing that we want? What's the next step?
I think there's a lot of science behind this, and I think it all comes back to the identity you link yourself to. So if we just had a single goal-driven approach when we achieve the goal, I think probably afterwards you just feel that emptiness. What's next? Because just that example you're talking about, Ben, going to the moon and then coming back. I mean, that's one of the highest speeds anyone can achieve, right? Then what? And I think this is where we need to, whenever we pursue a goal, in my opinion, we need to have a much higher purpose, a purpose that goes beyond the individual self. Because then you be looking at it from a more grand scheme of things, more impact scheme of things, in terms of how it could truly affect people around you, and then it gives you that higher purpose. And I think the phenomena you're talking about, I read in a lot of research articles as well, soldiers experience this as well, and also very high-performing CEOs and executive leaders also perform that. When they retire, they go into this depressive state because they've achieved so much in that particular role or position, and then after it's like, what's next? So a part of it comes down to, I believe, having that higher purpose that goes beyond you, and that and the vision to serve others. And the other one also is about the identity part of it. If you, for example, identify yourself as an executive leader or a CEO, for example, what happens when you are not a CEO, when you are not in that position anymore? Most of the time, I think you would feel a bit lost, because that's a part of your identity. So it's very important for us to also think about the identity part as well. I think I firmly believe it goes hand in hand with peak performance.
That's very powerful, Kush. I think we can all fall into that trap of, you're at a dinner party and someone says, "Hi, what do you do?" Which is really, we interpret as, "Who are you?" And we go, "Oh, I'm a chiropractor. Oh, I'm a CFO. Oh, I'm a radio announcer. Oh, I own this. Oh, I'm the CEO of this." Well, that's not really who we are. It's one of the jobs we do. It's one of the missions that we have, but it isn't us. And the challenge is, as you say, often when we lose that mission. For example, if you were a husband and you find yourself divorced, well, you're not a husband anymore. So what happens to that identity? What happens to that thing that you held on to that you were? If we have a job and we're a CEO and we lose our role as a CEO, well, what does that mean for you? Have you lost a chunk of you? No, it's just one of your missions is no longer activated. But you are still you. That's very, very powerful, Kush. Mate, it's a great conversation. I know it's a lot that you cover in your book. Where can people get your book, Play at Your Peak? I know it's only just been released this week, which is why I wanted to have you on the show. Is it available yet in our bookstores? Is it available online? Where can they find it?
So not yet. That's the part I'm actually just initiating at the moment. But for the time being, if you go to kushan.blog, there's a way to request the book. I would say that would be the easiest way to do it at the moment, because as you said, it was really literally like a couple of days ago.
Yes.
So the rollout will take a few more days. So for the time being, please feel free to check out kushan.blog, and there's a link to the book.
Kushan.blog. So it's KUSHAN.blog.
Yep. Beautiful.
Not like me to jump the gun, Kush, and to promote your book before it's available in our bookstores. But great that people can request access to it and find ways to perform better at their play. And importantly, as you said, as your title of your book, it's play at your peak. Yep. This is not something that needs to be seen as hard work. It can be something that can be just something that we learn to play with performing at our peak. Kush, great to have you on the show. Appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of the week and look forward to catching up with you again soon. We're going to go to a great song which is perfect for this conversation, which is called Life, What You Make It. Thanks, Kush.